In this video, I want to review some ideas about fractions and hopefully help you make some connections between fractions, decimals, and percentages. So when we think about what a fraction is, there are lots of different ways that we could think about that. We can think of it as a part of a whole. We may think that it has something to do with division. We can think of different representations like 3/4. We can think of decimal 0.75, which is the same as 3 out of 4. Right? So lots of things when we think about what a fraction is. Probably our best definition is just a part of a whole. Thinking about words and symbols that might represent fractions, we have our fraction bar. This is something that a lot of us think of. So 3 out of 2 is a way that we might say this. You can also see it written like this with the forward slash. Oftentimes, it's, certain programs will only let us write it like this, but that means the exact same thing as if we were to use the fraction bar. The numerator is what we call the top number in a fraction, and the denominator is what we call the bottom number in a fraction. So up here, 3 would be the numerator and 2 would be the denominator. We will talk further about percentages and division. And another way that we say fractions is we might say like 3 out of 4 would be that fraction 3 over 4, like that. So thinking about how fractions and division are alike, they are the same. For example, if we divide 3 things into 5 pieces, each piece is going to be 3/5 of a whole. So we could write that as a decimal as 0.6. If you put it in your calculator, that's what you would get. So when you see a fraction, you can think of that as division happening. 3/5 is the same as if we were to take 3 and divide it by 5. Again, we can take a fraction, and any fraction can be written as a decimal, any decimal can be written as a fraction. We can do that, so most often you will take a fraction like 3/10 and you can put it in your calculator and just get this 0.3, but that can be written in a number of different ways. That's the same as 30 out of 100 or 300 out of 1,000. So there's more than one way to write the same fraction. We want to think about percentages. We're still just thinking about fractions and decimals and division. It's still all the same thing, but what it means to be a percentage is that we are out of 100. So the percent is the numerator when our denominator is 100. So it is how much out of 100. So for example, if we had this fraction 3.5 out of 10, and you put that in your calculator, it'll give you something like this, 0.35. And we recognize that what this really is this is 35 out of 100, or 35%. And it helps some of us to think about the decimal places as well, like that 3 is in the tenths place, and that 5 is in the hundredths place. So this would be 35 out of 100, as we see right here. When we add and subtract fractions, we need to make sure that we have a common denominator, which means, the way that I like to think about this, is that the pieces are the same size. So the numerator is like how many pieces we have, and the denominator is how big they are. So for example, this addition problem right here, we have 3/8, that's represented by these 3 sections, and then we have 2/8, that's the red sections here. So 3/8 plus 2/8 will give us a total of 5/8. As long as we know our pieces are the same size, meaning the denominator is the same size, then we can just do normal addition and subtraction with our numerators. Multiplication is going to be a little bit different. We multiply fractions straight across, meaning that if I have 2/3 times 4/5, we are going to multiply the numerators, 2 times 4, and multiply the denominators, 3 times 5. That's shown here. So 2 times 4 is 8, 3 times 5 is 15. So if we multiply these two fractions, you would get 8/15. The most intuitive way that I've come up with to think about this is using a diagram here. So if we have, for example, if I have this entire square, so if I take 1/3 of that square, that could be represented by this rectangle here. This is 1/3 of, I guess it's not a square because it's a 3x4 grid. So 1/3 of that would be represented by this. And if I multiply by 1/4, meaning I take 1/4 of this third, we would just have that purple section there, and what that actually is 1/12. So not the most intuitive operation to do, but this does show one way that we can think about that. And finally, I want to think a little bit about negative signs and fractions. This is something that often confuses students. If I have a negative sign written out front, just like it is here, students tend to think that this means, they want to think that this means that both of these numbers are negative, -3 divided by -5. But if I do that, we already said that fractions are division. So if I take -3 divided by -5, that's going to be a positive number. Negative divided by negative is positive, and that's actually going to give us positive 0.6. But I don't want that, right? What this is saying is that I have -3/5. So this we could really think of this as -3/5, and which would be -0.6. So this is not true. It is not true that -3/5 is equal to -3 divided by -5. When you see that negative sign out front, so if we have negative, try to line this up really well, -3 divided by 5, what that really means is we can think of that negative sign as being on either the 3, so we could have it written like this, or on the 5. So a negative out front is the same as negative on the 3 or a negative on the 5. It is one negative sign that's being applied to that fraction.